Marissa Cole, a 26-year-old bartender from Chicago, and Sheikh Khalid Al-Rashid, a billionaire oil magnate from Dubai, seemed destined to live in worlds that would never collide. Yet their brief, intoxicating affair spiraled into one of the most shocking crimes of the decade, ending with power, betrayal, and murder in a luxury hotel suite. Marissa Cole was 26, living in a cramped apartment on the north side of Chicago, working long nights at a bar that smelled of spilled beer and cigarette smoke. The place was loud, always filled with music and laughter, but for her, it felt like a cage. She had been there for years, pouring drinks for businessmen, students, and tourists, smiling for tips that barely covered rent. On the surface, she blended in with the crowd of young people chasing their dreams in the city, but beneath that surface was restlessness. She scrolled through her phone every morning, looking at influencers who wore diamonds, traveled on private jets, and seemed to live without worry. The comparison gnawed at her. She had charm, beauty, and sharp instincts. People liked her. Men, especially wealthy ones, tipped heavily when she leaned in just a little closer. Yet, every morning she woke up to the same chipped ceiling, the same unpaid bills on her counter, the same reminder that charm didn't pay the price of freedom. In her heart, she wanted more. Not just comfort, but power. Marissa had learned how to listen, how to notice the details others missed. She could tell when a man was married by the indentation of a ring, when someone was lying by the twitch of their jaw. These skills made her valuable behind the bar, but they also made her dangerous. She was watching, waiting for an opportunity that could pull her out of the monotony. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to twist into something unrecognizable. On one particular evening, when the city streets shimmered with summer heat and the bar was buzzing louder than usual, the kind of opportunity she had been dreaming of finally walked through the door. Sheikh Khalid Al-Rashid was unlike anyone Marissa had ever met. The moment he entered the bar, surrounded by a small circle of men in tailored suits, the air seemed to shift. Conversations lowered, eyes followed, and even the most confident patrons shrank in comparison to his presence. He was older, in his mid-40s, with the kind of confidence that came only from vast wealth and power. His watch alone gleamed like a signal, worth more than Marissa could make in a decade. She was used to wealthy customers, but this was different. He carried himself not like someone trying to show off, but like someone who had nothing to prove. Marissa caught his attention almost immediately. She leaned across the bar with her usual charm, but with him, it felt different, like her every move was being measured. He noticed her wit, her sharp remarks, her ability to handle a crowded room without flinching. That night, she slipped her number onto a napkin with his final drink. By the next evening, she was whisked into a world she had only imagined. It began with quiet dinners at exclusive restaurants in Chicago, then extended to late-night drives in luxury cars. Within weeks, he was flying her out to Dubai, where skyscrapers pierced the sky and opulence surrounded her at every corner. Shopping trips left her with bags of designer clothes, jewelry she never thought she'd touch, and the constant thrill of feeling untouchable. Every moment was intoxicating. Private jets, villas, parties where champagne flowed endlessly. Marissa told herself it was love, but deep down she knew it was more than that. It was validation. It was proof that she was worthy of the life she dreamed about. And as the months passed, she began to believe that she belonged in his world forever. The fairy tale unraveled slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The Sheikh's calls, once constant, began to space out. Trips that used to come with little warning suddenly required excuses. Urgent meetings, family obligations, pressing business overseas. Marissa brushed it off in the beginning, convincing herself he was simply busy. But the silence grew louder. Days turned into weeks without a message, and the lavish invitations that had once arrived without pause simply stopped coming. When she reached out, her texts hung unanswered. Phone calls rang endlessly before slipping into voicemail. The man who once treated her like a prized jewel had turned into a shadow, unreachable and uninterested. Marissa's stomach knotted each time she scrolled through social media, looking for signs of his life. He was still traveling, still dining in fine restaurants, still surrounded by others. The only difference was her absence. Returning to Chicago felt like waking up from a dream she couldn't get back to. She walked into her apartment, still cluttered with shopping bags from trips abroad, but the luxury now felt mocking. The designer shoes sat in the corner like relics from a past she wasn't allowed to revisit. At the bar, coworkers asked about her glamorous adventures, and she lied through gritted teeth, pretending everything was as it had been. Inside, humiliation burned. It wasn't just rejection. It was the way he had discarded her as though she had never mattered, as though she had been a temporary amusement easily replaced. That realization hollowed her out. Nights behind the bar felt longer, tips felt smaller, and the laughter of customers only sharpened her anger. What she once thought was love had curdled into bitterness. What she once thought was security had been exposed as an illusion. The abandonment wasn't just painful, it was unbearable. Marissa's bitterness transformed into something heavier, something she couldn't set down no matter how hard she tried. Every night after work, she sat in her apartment replaying the past year in her mind. She scrolled through old photos of trips, gifts, and dinners, torturing herself with memories of how close she had been to the life she wanted. The Sheikh's silence gnawed at her like an open wound. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, control, and revenge. She convinced herself she had been used, played with, and then abandoned like trash. That thought hardened into obsession. She began tracking him online, piecing together fragments of his life from business articles, society pages, and private accounts he never knew she could access. Late at night, she studied flight patterns, noting when his private jet touched down in different cities. The thrill of following him from afar fueled her fixation, giving her a sense of connection even as the distance grew. When she learned he still visited Chicago under the radar for secretive deals, something inside her snapped into focus. This wasn't over. Her obsession bled into every part of her life. At work, she appeared distracted, her once smooth banter replaced with long silences. Friends noticed she drank more, lingered less, and seemed restless even in familiar spaces. But no one knew the depth of her plotting. She had started sketching out scenarios in notebooks, ways to confront him, ways to make him listen, ways to take back control. The fantasies grew darker as her anger grew sharper. For Marissa, there was no turning back. The betrayal had planted a seed, and it had taken root. By the time she marked his return trip to Chicago on her calendar, she wasn't planning a conversation. She was planning a reckoning. The night of the Sheikh's return to Chicago was cloaked in rain, the city lights reflecting off slick streets like shards of broken glass. Marissa had been waiting for this moment with a cold patience, following every movement until she knew the exact hotel he would stay in. The presidential suite on the top floor was guarded most nights, but she had timed her entry with precision. She had studied the routines of his bodyguards, noting when they stepped away, when the hallway cameras shifted, when he preferred solitude. By the time she slipped inside, her pulse was steady, her mind sharpened by months of simmering rage. The suite smelled faintly of cigars and expensive cologne. The Sheikh was startled at first, but the look of recognition quickly spread across his face. For a moment, the illusion of their old life flickered, the memory of private dinners and whispered promises. But the past had no weight now. The room felt like a battlefield, and every second charged with tension. What began as a desperate attempt to demand answers spiraled faster than she expected. Words turned heated, accusations spilled, and his dismissal of her, sharp, final, unforgiving, ignited the fury she had been carrying. The act itself was sudden, violent, and irreversible. In the blur of rage, Marissa crossed the line she had imagined so many nights before. When silence fell, it was heavier than any sound. The Sheikh's body lay lifeless on the polished floor, his empire reduced in that instant to stillness. Marissa stood frozen, her chest rising and falling with frantic breath. This was not the closure she had convinced herself she needed. It was something darker, emptier. The man who had once symbolized her escape from mediocrity was gone, and all that remained was the echo of her own decision. Panic coursed through Marissa as she stared at the motionless body on the hotel floor. The reality of what she had done pressed down like a weight she couldn't lift. Her hands trembled, but instinct pushed her to act. She tore through the suite, wiping surfaces, collecting anything she might have touched. Glasses, napkins, even a pillow she had leaned against. All were carefully moved or cleaned. She checked the bathroom, the balcony, every corner of the room, desperate to erase her presence. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second pulling her closer to discovery. She stuffed the gloves she had worn into her purse, along with a few stray items that might link back to her. Before leaving, she paused by the door, steadying her breathing. She forced her face into calm neutrality, as though she were any other guest strolling through the luxurious hallways. The rain outside disguised her quick departure, washing away the sweat that clung to her skin. By the time the Sheikh's body was discovered hours later by hotel staff, she was already miles away, back in her apartment, replaying the night over and over in her mind. News broke swiftly. An international figure, dead in a Chicago hotel suite, sent shockwaves across the globe. Media outlets speculated wildly: assassination plots, business rivals, political enemies. Security footage showed only fragments of guards, businessmen, and hotel staff moving in and out, none pointing to her. Marissa's name was nowhere in the conversation. For weeks, she lived inside that gap of silence, hiding in plain sight. But survival came at a cost. Sleep eluded her. Every siren outside her window made her flinch. At work, she forced smiles while her heart raced with paranoia. Outwardly, she blended in, but inside, the secret screamed louder with each passing day. In the weeks that followed, Marissa believed she had escaped suspicion. Investigators scoured business records, questioned rival associates, and speculated about political motives. The narrative painted the Sheikh as a target of power struggles far larger than a simple personal vendetta. Marissa hid behind this chaos, convincing herself the storm would pass without her name ever surfacing. Yet, the longer she lived with the secret, the more reckless she became. At first, her arrogance was subtle. She wore jewelry he had gifted her, flaunting it at the bar as if it were a harmless accessory. Then came the stories she slipped into conversations after too many drinks. Cryptic remarks about knowing powerful men, about traveling to Dubai, about experiences her coworkers couldn't quite reconcile with her paycheck. Whispers spread, and rumors grew. Curiosity turned into suspicion, and her mask of innocence began to crack. The final mistake came from her own negligence. In her frantic cleanup at the hotel, she had missed a single fingerprint on the edge of a glass. For weeks it had gone unnoticed, buried in the avalanche of forensic evidence. But once investigators widened their net, the print surfaced and tied her directly to the scene. Her name was pulled into the investigation, and everything unraveled in an instant. The arrest was swift and merciless. Courtrooms filled with media, headlines screamed her betrayal, and the image of a young bartender turned murderer dominated the news cycle. During the trial, the glamour she once craved was replaced with cold stares and harsh judgment. She was sentenced to life, her name forever linked to the man she once idolized. The story of Marissa Cole became a chilling tale, a reminder of how obsession can consume ambition and turn desire into destruction.